Oh, Barry's on this. That'll be good.
Okay. I'm just muting everyone, and then I'm going to make board members and administrators co-hosts, so you'll be able to do what you like with your mute button. And there we go. We should be streaming live. Very good. Okay. Excellent. Okay. We'll call to order this regular meeting of the Easton Board of Education at 7:30 p.m. on November 10th, 2020. In attendance, if we can just do a quick roll call, you should all be co-hosts and able to unmute. So I see Gretchen, I see Randy Hicks, I see Jeff Parker. Oh, here comes Jenny right now. And sorry, Devin, I'm not seeing you if you're on the pages. It may be that you're no, I don't think Devin.
Jenny's in the waiting room, it looks like.
Yep. It looks like she's just joining now. So we'll have Jenny with us in a moment. And then I think we're just missing Devin, and I know she was on the last call with us, so I think she'll be here in just a moment. Very good. Bear with me. Good, recording and live. Excellent. Okay. Perfect. Okay, first item or second item is the approval of minutes. I'm gonna attempt to see if we can put these all into one, so we don't need a bunch of separate motions. So the chair will entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes for the Easton, Reading, and Region 9 special meetings that occurred on September 30th and October 30th, the October 13th regular meeting of the Easton Board of Education, and the October 27th regular meeting of the Easton, Reading, Region 9 Boards of Education. Do I have a motion? I see Jenny. Thank you, Jenny. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. Discussion? Hearing none.
If we're doing these together, John, I probably will abstain because I think I missed the tri-boards.
I think that's probably right. You did miss that one meeting. All right. So let me just double check. I think Devin is in. Devin, you're in? I just want to make sure we have a vote of the majority here, even with an abstention there. Good. Any additional conversation? Any additional discussion? Okay. Very good. We'll call the question. Jenny?
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff?
Said yes.
Okay, thank you. Devin?
Yes.
Thank you. Gretchen?
Yes.
Randy abstains, and I vote yes. Passes 5 with one abstention. 5-0. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Moves us to our next item number 3, public comment. I know we have a lot of topics to cover tonight, and I know there's a lot going on. So we may hear from a lot of people. I would ask that people try to limit their comments to 3 minutes. I'll have a timer directionally. I'll try not to cut you off right in the middle of a comment, but if we can please ask that people limit their time to 3 minutes, it would be much appreciated. In order to indicate your interest in speaking, just wave us down or raise your hand using the participant window in Zoom. I see Barry. Barry, is it Hakeem?
Yep,
unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes, if you can just say your name and then your street.
Sure. My name is Barry Hakeem. I live in Harvestman Road. Just a general question / comment. I understand today, got an email from Dr. Harrison. Welcome to the community, by the way. I don't think we've met yet, but I understand we're going back to hybrid learning starting next week, and I don't know if this can be answered now or addressed now or if it needs to be, but I just want to make sure that there's some sort of plan in place to make sure or ensure going forward that the kids are still going to be meeting basic, I guess you'd say, requirements or minimal levels of education that we would expect them to be at their respective grades. If they're in second grade, that they're up to par with second grade and third grade, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we left school in March and we had difficulty keeping up. And I know that teachers have done a great job trying to bring them back up to speed as far as learning what they were supposed to learn in the prior grade, as well as what they're supposed to be learning in this grade. But as we go back to a hybrid type model, I know that it's difficult on the teachers and everybody else as well to, monitor that, so to speak. And I know it's difficult to give them assignments, to teach them and everything like that while they're home. And I just wanted to understand, I don't know if it's going to be addressed later during the meeting or if you want to talk about it now or whatever. I don't know how this works, but just want to make sure that we're going to be watching out to make sure that the students are where they should be as far as educational.
Thank you, Barry. I see Nikki has her hand
up. Nikki Caldowie, Staples Road. I just want to, the fact that we're going back hybrid, I was just wondering, I know a lot of colleges right now, and obviously we're not college, but the fact that we're going hybrid a week before Thanksgiving, I was just wondering if there was a way that we could stay full in, because transmission isn't really happening in the schools. And trust me, I'm all about the safety, and I'm coming off 2 weeks, my son being home quarantined right now for 5th grade. So I might be a little raw, but if we go back, keep full in until Thanksgiving, and then go all remote from Thanksgiving through the 2nd week in January, I just think it makes more sense, because for these teachers to have to keep juggling, going back and forth, not knowing every day they leave if they're not going to go back in for 2 weeks. I just think it puts a lot on the kids not knowing. It puts a lot on the teachers not knowing. And, if we don't know where people are going to be for the holidays, people aren't going to sit at home. So that puts everyone in a really weird situation. So I was just wondering if that would be a possibility. I know colleges aren't going back to like 2nd week in January or February, just to give that lag time from the holidays. And just to kind of reiterate what Barry was saying, I do hope there's more like consistency. These teachers are beyond working their butts off. And I was a teacher, and I really can't even imagine what they're all going through right now. So I give them all the credit in the world, and the administrators and everyone. But I do hope a little bit more consistency with the work or the Zooms. I think it makes it easier on the kids too, just to have more during the day to do. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather.
Good evening, Board of Education, administration, and members of the Easton community. I'm Heather Murray, a special education teacher at SSES. I'm speaking to you on behalf of the Easton Education Association. The EEA wants to bring to your attention the growing concern for the staff and students' health and safety. The number of COVID cases in the state are increasing, especially in Fairfield County, as well as both buildings and the other schools within ER9. Although the decision to transition to the hybrid model has been made, it is the EEA's position that the Easton Public Schools should be in a full distance model at the present time. There have been concerns brought up about proper contact tracing in both buildings when there is a positive case, as well as the mixing of cohorts during recess and lunch. Also, due to the staff members quarantining, there have been many staffing coverage challenges. We understand the importance of students receiving the best education possible, and that the all-in model is the most ideal model for many reasons. But at the same time, we feel that the health and safety of both the student and teacher population should take precedent. The teachers have been given time to prepare for distance learning through the professional development days, as well as working with their teams on developing curriculum for a distance learning model. The membership is willing and ready to take on the challenges of distance learning to make sure that students continue to have the quality education they deserve. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Heather. Are there any other members of the public who would like to make comment at this point? Okay, hearing none, I'll move on to board member comment. Jeff,
I have one.
please.
I certainly understand that moving into this school year would require ramp up time to get everyone, teachers, staff, and students involved, comfortable, and productive. However, moving forward, the time being invested at the middle school level, Pride for 230 minutes a week and something called Home Base for 120 minutes a week, which are not tied to our core curriculum, will make it, I believe, too difficult for teachers and their students to cover all the material necessary for the students to be ready for the next school year. My deep concern is whether it's a first grader, someone who was a first grader in March of 2019 moving into third grade in the fall of 2021, or a seventh grader in March of 19 moving into Barlow in the fall of 21, is their readiness with the foundation, educational foundation, to be successful. Therefore, I encourage both the board and the administration to make a, quote, course correction and take the Pride and home base minutes back and devote them to academic growth.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other board member comment? Jenny.
I'm sorry. I wrote mine down too. I'm going to try to paraphrase it down a little bit though. And I just want to apologize in advance if any of the numbers that I'm using as far as the specific case numbers at each of the different schools is inaccurate. I apologize. It could be off by one or two in a couple of cases. I just wanted to say that I was disappointed to learn of the transition to hybrid learning scheduled for next week. I don't think that Easton's health data suggests this transition is necessary. It was my understanding that these decisions would be made within recommended parameters, but would take into account our most immediate experience within our own school system. I look more to the nature of the quarantining as an issue rather than the occurrence of cases. I appreciated the stepped approach taken at the high school with a short closure followed by contact tracing and a return to the existing schedule for the majority of students. I would definitely need more information to understand why it has been necessary in some instances to send entire grade levels home for a 2-week period when it seems highly unlikely, if not impossible, that 100 students were in direct exposure to one individual for the amount of time needed to be deemed a direct contact. It is also my understanding that the cases at SSES mainly stemmed from an isolated incident outside of school, but again, I would need more information to fully understand and form a fully educated opinion. I do, however, would appreciate the entire community and school system maintaining perspective when talking about the incidence of positive cases. SSES, HKMS, and Joel Barlow together educate over 1,700 students. If I round up to 10 positive cases, it's 0.59% of the student body. 4 out of 542 at SSES, and this is where I apologize if my numbers are off. 2 at Keller, 1 or 2 at Keller, and 2 out of almost 900 students at Barlow. And again, I might be wrong there. Maybe it's 3 or 4. If I'm off again, I even apologized in my writing. But I would ask again for more information that connects these numbers to the need to return to the hybrid model. The main point of my comments from a board perspective is the need for more information and involvement. This may be the 4th time I'm imploring central office to include the board in the Stay Open Committee and process. I cannot serve my community if I do not know what is going on. I received letters from teachers today and a rather damning communication from the teachers union, to which I had to respond that the board is not involved in the decision-making process related to COVID-19 and the learning mode chosen in any way. We're receiving the same notifications that parents receive and little more. Certainly a board can come together to steer an issue in a given direction, but that's never how the board and administration in Easton have operated in the past, and I would never want to see that changed. But I do think it's important to ask again for more information and participation at this critical time. We need to understand as much about the nature of the cases and potential exposure as possible within the rights of privacy. We need to understand the contact tracing process and be up to date on local and state recommendations, as well as the practical boots on the ground issues presenting challenges in the schools. There are immediate and long-term educational, safety, and financial implications for all of the decisions related to the pandemic, and we cannot participate effectively if we are not informed and part of the process. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, basically, there's so much going on, and this is such a critical time, and I still feel like the board is not as informed as we could be, and not as involved in the process as is necessary, with so much at stake and so many questions in so many different arenas. And again, we're not there, we're not making the decisions, but it would be helpful to understand more about each decision as it arises, as opposed to just learning of things via email along with the remainder of the community. I really think, and this is not just, we've all experienced issues where people are just insisting on process. I don't think this is just insisting on process. I think this is requesting information. All right, John, sorry if I took too long.
No, yeah, I think board members are entitled to as much time as they need. Devin?
So I just want to address moving to the hybrid model, especially with the youngest learners. There's a ton of research out there that indicates the impact of our youngest kids. It's like K-5, but especially K through 3, not having opportunities to engage with their peers in in-person learning. And that the quality, no matter how good the teacher is, how good the plan is, so this is definitely not in any way a knock on the amazing work that our teachers are doing. It's just not terribly effective for those children. So I was hoping that we would be able to put in tighter protocols around mask wearing, washing hands, change how we potentially eat lunch in pods. I know they're doing that in the kindergarten already, and potentially re-examine how we do recess before we move to, a learning situation in which we know that a lot of our kids are going to struggle, and that puts a lot of our community in a position where we might have to also choose to have outside care that then increases exposure, not only for our families, for our kids, but also for their teachers. That at least in our youngest learners, that we find a way to compromise and keep those students in person for a longer amount of time.
Thank you, Devin. Any other board member comment? Yeah, Randy, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to go off topic and then I'm going to come back to this topic. I'm just asking the administration if we're going to see anything about results from some of the testing maybe that occurred in September, October, as it related to where we sort of finished the year last year being remote, obviously from March on. And then going back to this topic, I'm obviously, the email came out today. I'm very interested to hear from the administration about the process that they undertook to obviously come up with this decision, which is not an easy one. And I'll wait to maybe the second board member comment to share an opinion, because it's somewhat uninformed at this point. I think what this also touches on is just communication at the board level. And obviously, a lot of this communication stems between the chair and the administration, and then the chair disseminates some of that information to their other board members. I mean, this role, doesn't really work as effectively if it's just a 2 or 3 hour meeting once a month. I know we're all sort of somewhat new at our respective roles. And so this will morph itself into, a relationship that, hopefully is productive for all around. So I just think it's important that we as board members, keep the lines of communication very much open, in between the meetings, and not to have online meetings, obviously, but one-on-one or 2 or 3 folks conducting conversations. And, some of this again comes through the chair from the superintendent, because the superintendent is already challenged, but to communicate with 21 board members across the 3 districts is also unwieldy. So anyway, but hopefully more to come tonight.
Any other board member comment? Okay, just a couple of things. So I think we'll dive in on this kind of thing in subsequent meetings. I think it's going to be important for members of the community, certainly the board, and everybody involved in these processes who pay attention to have a better understanding of freedom of information and sort of the online meetings that Randy just mentioned. We are relatively hemmed in on what we can do in terms of dialogue back and forth. And so to the degree that we're able to send information and sort of connect with one another as board members, it's essentially what are you available for in terms of meetings and forwarding notes that can't go back and forth. So if I want to forward a note from Dr. Harrison or from Dr. Pearson-Ugal or others in central office, then that's a possibility. And I think we need to do sort of a better job of increasing the places where we're sort of making communications available. And that's a big part of why we started doing the Between Three Chairs. And we would love to hear from the community about topics you'd like to hear discussed there. We want to get out of this world where all we're focusing in on is COVID. And I think you'll hear from administrators tonight, both at the school level as well as central office, that unfortunately that desire is not possible right now. They've been spending all of their time on that. And we have a whole host of strategic goals that we should be trying to accomplish and that we would love to accomplish. But unfortunately, the only game in town is COVID as it sort of steals our focus. I would also make a comment just to try to recenter the sort of conversation around expectations. I keep hearing people say, how do we make sure that we keep on track? And I think we heard it from the public and we've heard it from board members. How do we make sure that we stay on track? And I think it's necessary to acknowledge that we are in, at a minimum, a once in a century occurrence right now with what's happening with this pandemic. Probably the biggest pandemic in the last 300 to 400 years, but at a minimum, the last 100 years. I think the answer to how do we stay on track is, what's the track look like? The track has been decimated. And I think we have to acknowledge there is going to be some slipping. And then we have to say, how do we get that back in, for a student who's in 6th grade now, as I think about my own boys, how do we get them back on track in 7th grade and 8th grade and so on? And especially as vaccines are available and things like that, we can return to normal. But the track for the near term, my expectation is not that my kids are staying with where they would otherwise have been sans COVID. All right. So moving on to reports. We'll hear from Dr. Harrison first.
Good evening, everyone. So I just wanted to give an update on COVID. And as we already mentioned, we heard that the email went out earlier this afternoon, notifying the community that we were shifting back to a hybrid. I think in just between public comment and board member comment, we've heard already just kind of the whole range of, you can make a really strong argument for why it's important to stay full in person and continue with the face-to-face learning model that we're in. You could also make a really good argument of why, based on the health data in our town and surrounding towns, where it could be make sense to go full remote. And I think that hearing that spectrum is kind of a good picture of the challenges of making these decisions on a daily basis. And so just from an informational standpoint, we have our 2 health directors that we're working with, one obviously in Easton, who works with Easton, Weston, and Westport, and then our Reading health director as well. And we have scheduled meetings with them where we are looking at our town data. One of the things that we've seen in the last couple of weeks is, as the numbers of positive cases per 100,000 population increases in towns across the state. They're shifting into using the town alert system from yellow to orange, from orange to red. Currently in both Easton and Reading, as of today's data that was reviewed this morning, we are in orange. That said, we've had additional cases that we were notified about today. And I think that for our towns, and then especially for Fairfield County, we are quickly moving into the red zone. Part of the meetings that I've been participating in beyond with our local health directors is with our state health officials and also members of the state's emergency Department of Emergency sort of task force, which includes updates from the governor. And one of the things that I've mentioned in previous messages to our community is that we had not seen any spread within our schools. And so, yes, we've had isolated cases, but we've not seen we didn't have evidence of transmission within the school system. And then I shared the email this weekend that one of the cases that came to us this weekend was the first probable evidence that there was within school transmission. We initially had a meeting scheduled with our local health directors, and by we, I mean Dr. Pearson-Ugal and myself, and then also our nurse coordinator, Corey Disler. We had that meeting scheduled on Thursday. After having that transmission within the buildings occur over the weekend, or evidence of that, we shifted that meeting till yesterday. And then, as I mentioned in the email that went to our families, we also reviewed the data today. As we've been looking at the data, there have been two things that I've tracked really closely, and this is in partnership, obviously, with our health directors, but also in consultation with the information that we're hearing from the state. While there is have been in towns increased cases and shifting from orange to red or yellow to red or yellow to orange, based on the number of new cases within a 14-day period. That data, we have not seen significant increases statewide in data, in cases in our schools that match the level of trajectory that we're seeing in the community. So there's a couple of assumptions that have to be made with that. So one assumption is that in our schools, these are places where we are very consistently implementing mitigation strategies that we know are beneficial in minimizing the spread of this virus. So schools are places where we are seeing consistent mask wearing and more ability to social distance and more routine regimens related to hygiene and hand washing and all of those pieces. And despite those mitigating strategies, we still see that there are cases that continue to creep up. And so as we've had this conversation about, and this is we, the collective of superintendents, as we've been having these conversations with relationship to the changing health data for towns, there was this ongoing question of, so if our town goes to orange or if our town goes to red, does that automatically mean that we shift to a different learning model? And the answer to that was no, because there were some critical pieces that we needed to consider when making that shift. And one of the big ones is whether or not there is evidence of transmission within our schools. And that was a significant piece to making this decision. Despite the fact that, and I don't say this exaggerating, but for the last 2 days, I have spent about 95% of both days only focused on COVID-related issues, whether it is through contact tracing, working on communication, meetings, data review, all of those pieces. Despite that fact, and I know that that's true for many of our administrators and also for several of our teachers, I have to be reminded that we are in the business of teaching and learning. And so, you know, some of the points that we already heard, we know that in-person learning is the most effective approach to teaching and learning. We recognize that coming out of several months of missed learning for our students last spring, that there is ground to make up. And so that means that we really need to treat every possible minute of instruction as critical opportunities for us to meet the academic, social, and emotional needs of our students. The thing that we are continue to remind ourselves of is, you know, when our students and teachers are going in and out of quarantine, when students are seeing friends that they are used to seeing on the playground, suddenly they're home quarantining, or they know someone's sick in their family, it really puts a lot of pressure on our educators who are working directly with students to not just be focused on the academic needs of our students, but also to consider the emotional and social impact that this pandemic is having on our students, and think about ways to consider mitigating strategies in the same way that we do around health, that we do that around their social and emotional well-being as well. And then also looking at the best ways to meet their academic needs. So all that said, I think it's important to know that all of these pieces go into how we are making changes to either to maintain the current learning model that we're in, or to consider changing to a different learning model. There are the other pieces that play into this, and we've been very, very lucky to date in our community, is staffing. And so in a lot of cases, as more and more teachers or staff members are required to quarantine because of exposure outside of school, we could eventually get to a critical place within our schools where we don't have adequate staffing in order to teach and supervise our students. So that's another data piece that I'm continuing to watch with support from Vicki, just looking at what our absences look like. Are there trends that we need to consider across those lines? And then to the question of this process of contact tracing and communication. We started off a couple of weeks ago with our first case in Reading and at Reading Elementary. And after getting all of that communication out, we brought our administrators back together, brought the Stay Open team together, and talked about, you know, what did we learn from this process? What do we need to think about differently? The challenge here is that every single case is very unique. And, you know, I've said that a number of times. The thing that really punctuates that sentiment of how unique every case is when you start getting into the specifics, where from a confidentiality standpoint, I just can't do that. So, you know, it would be helpful to know, well, because this was an adult versus a student, or because this was there was a familial relationship between these areas, this is why this impacted this differently. And you just can't get into that. I had a great conversation with Heather Murray today, just in talking with some of the concerns that she mentioned tonight related to the concerns raised by the EEA, and how even the process of contact tracing, where we start with the positive case and then start to ask questions from there, that's even driven by whether or not that individual or the parent of that individual gives us permission to share the identity of that person as we're contact tracing. If not, that makes it a lot more challenging. We talked about the situation at Keller where we closed for a day in order to do contact tracing that day. Part of that was because we were notified of the positive case after 7 o'clock at night on a Sunday, and being able to thoroughly do the contact tracing at that time was challenging. We saw that similar issue at the high school. And that's not necessarily the case when we're talking about elementary cases. And I get it. I know how frustrating this is for our community and for our families who are with such levels of uncertainty, wanting to find something that they could sort of latch onto that is predictable, and I think that's my biggest challenge as a superintendent, recognizing that there is no sort of predictable formula that will make every response the same, and then with that, it's the inability of being able to share exactly all of the behind the scenes details. As far as the shift to hybrid starting on Monday, a couple of things that we really considered in looking at the timing of that shift. So in the meeting yesterday with the 2 health directors, we talked about our current data. We talked about the transmission within schools, and their recommendation was for us to shift to a hybrid. And so that, again, I think it's important to note that decision was not made in isolation from our health officials, but in coordination with them. And the benefit of waiting till Monday is to give our families an opportunity to put childcare plans in place and all of those pieces, so that we can be prepared. And then also, as someone mentioned, just sort of the back and forth shift with our teachers and staff, give them an opportunity to plan and gather materials so that we could ensure that we're able to use that time wisely while one cohort of students is working at home. I love when during a board presentation or a superintendent's report, I'm able to give really definitive answers. People who have worked with me know that I love a good spreadsheet or a chart or a graphic that really kind of captures everything and explains it out. And that's where we're really challenged here. It's just such a unique situation to be in, with trying to make the right decision and consider all of the competing factors. And with that, I know, John, you spoke to this just a little bit, just as far as, who's at the table when we're making the decisions. I certainly don't want to circumvent the ability for the board to weigh in or keep board members out of the process. This is one of the responsibilities of the superintendent to make these decisions, given that there's the level of access to the backside of the data that is fully informing whatever the next steps are, and needing to be able to maintain that confidentiality as well with board members. And so just know that I recognize the challenge, and we'll continue to look at ways to make that more effective.
John, you're on mute.
Yep. Thank you, Rita. It wouldn't be a meeting if somebody didn't say, hey, you're on mute. Thank you, Dr. Harrison. That takes us to Director of Special Education, Jen Del Conte.
Hi, I just wanted to just highlight some points on the board report. When you look at the data from November 2019 to where we are today, a lot of the, you see the percentages have changed. So for example, at Staples, we actually see a decline in the percentage of students receiving who are classified. We went from 17.2 to 13.1. This is pretty much aligned with what the state average is. So I call this, we're kind of like we're right sizing our special needs population. Helen Keller has pretty much remained stable at 14.9 to 14.6. While the numbers are looking good, I do want to point out that there is an upswing on the 504s, which is located at the bottom. So, and this is not unusual. Typically, when we declassify students, there's a celebration to that. It means they no longer require specially designed instruction, but many of them will still have a disability, but they need accommodations and they need modifications in order to continue to access the programs that they have. So it is not unusual for us when we see special ed numbers go down, that section 504 numbers go up. And again, I want to remind everyone that 504s is an accommodation program. So it really is, it still recognizes that a disability exists, but they don't need that special ed intense support, but they may still need the additional time because they still have a disability, or they may need, some kids may need extra set of books, they may need a visual schedule. So like I said, we do see a change in the 504 numbers from 29 to 53. I always, when you look at the second page, this is really where I spend a lot of my time. I'm looking at really at the different grade levels, because to me, this is the most interesting piece of data, because this will help us determine our staffing needs, where our resources go. So our preschool numbers, we tend to try to keep the preschool numbers a bit on the lower side because we have rolling admission. Birth to 3 is based on the student age. So before their 3rd birthday, whether it falls January through December, we still have to convene those meetings. And if they are eligible for a program, we will often provide the program within our Easton preschool program. So right now, these numbers that you see are not only preschool students that are in our preschool program, but there are also kids that come in from the outside. So for example, if they only need speech, or if they only need occupational therapy, they may come in and they're also counted in these numbers as well. What is interesting is that our largest cohorts really are at Helen Keller. And so we will be sending off to Barlow about 12 students, but then we have about 15 students coming in. So in other words, it probably will be a wash in terms of looking at sizes and staffing. But also, it's also interesting to see where the disabilities break out too. So for example, we have speech and language impaired, which is at Staples, followed by students with autism. And this is why we have our business program. And this is why we also have staffing to support those students. And in Helen Keller, we're seeing students with who have specific learning disabilities, who may have challenges with reading like dyslexia, or they may need more of a structured literacy approach. And you see that those numbers are on the higher side at Helen Keller. But overall, I think we have a very round perspective in terms of our numbers. And, by building programs like the Junior Virtues program and having, somebody who does structured literacy, you hired somebody prior to my arrival who had the background in structured literacy. We're starting to really build that continuum. And that's why you're beginning to see the numbers drop, because we are building in-house capacities to support the students. Do you have any questions for me?
Jeff?
I have one. Jen, there's 27 students that show up on the scoreboard on Kim's numbers in the preschool, and on your page too, you have 3 kids in the preschool with special needs. So am I to take that then 24 of the 27 that are currently in the preschool are all, quote, regular ed kids, or is there more to that story?
Well, right now we have about 6 students in the preschool that have IEPs. I ran through the numbers with my supervisor. We have about 6 students with IEPs, but we have about 3 or 4 that are waiting to come in from birth to 3. We also have what we call typicals in our preschool that may receive itinerant services. So in other words, because they don't need a special education teacher, but they need the speech, the OT, and the PT, they typically pay to come into our preschool. They would be called out for speech and OT. So we have about 6 to 8. I'm giving you a range, and then we will probably have maybe another 3 or 4 that we know of from birth to 3.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions for Jen? Okay. That moves us to Mrs. Fox Santora.
Good evening. How are you?
Well, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. I wanted to share a little bit about the cases that you read about. You received the email along with community members. On October 27th, we learned of a student with a positive case in 5th grade. So we needed to put the entire 5th grade and all of bus 12 in quarantine. That was 94 5th graders, and we had 13 staff and 18 students ride bus 12. So it's quite large. And they were to be in quarantine until their last day would be the 10th, which is today. So we expect them back tomorrow or the first day. The following week on that Monday, we learned of 2 second graders in different classrooms who also tested positive. So we put into quarantine the entire 2nd grade, which is 85 students, 8 staff members as well. And then at the end of the day on Friday, we learned that another person in one of the 2nd grade classrooms tested positive. So while we expected that grade 2 cohort to return on November 11th, one class needs to extend their quarantine for an additional 7 days because they've already been apart from the person who tested positive for 7. So we needed to add on 7 more days. So the last day of quarantine for that one 2nd grade class will be November 16th. So we expect their return on the 17th. Similar to the 5th grade case, the cohort in the classroom and the cohorts in the cafeteria are pretty secure in terms of who mingles with whom. Where it becomes a little less certain is the playground. while we do ask the 3 classes that are eating in the cafeteria to play in one zone of the playground, and the kids who are eating the small gym in a different playground, they don't always stick to the zone that we've assigned them. And on occasion, when our teachers have helped us cover recess duty, it's they who've pointed out, no, that one's in my class, that one belongs in that cafeteria. So then we started figuring it a little bit more closely. But in truth, with the exception of the classroom teachers, the recess supervisors and Mr. Bronstein and I don't really have a good handle on which students belong in which of those 2 dining locations. So because of that, it really didn't make us feel terribly confident to say to parents, we are certain that those 2nd graders or those 5th graders didn't interact in close proximity. One of the things that we do see, which is to be expected, for the kids who aren't engaged in an active activity during recess time, they're typically standing around talking to their good friends, maybe rolling around, maybe sitting down. And we keep going over, you got to separate, you got to socially distance. And they do momentarily, and then they find themselves together again. And you might not know, but recess is a mask-free area so that they can play. So clearly we recognize that that's an issue. So what we've decided to do is to purchase those breakaway lanyards, so that if a student or a person were to get their hand or something caught in it, it just snaps free. We're going to get 2 different color lanyards, and we're going to ask the kids to put the lanyard on, obviously over their head, outside their jacket, so they're easily identifiable, so that anybody who's supervising recess can clearly see, nope, you're purple, you guys are belonging on the play structure, you guys are green, you guys need to be on the field. We think that that's going to help monitor the zones more closely. I also wanted to share, if you didn't look very closely at the enrollment report, we welcomed 6 new students since we last talked in October. And we have another kindergartner joining us on November 16th. We have another 5 4th graders joining us before the first of the year. So we're becoming a very popular place, but we're happy to have people who feel so good about coming to Easton and attending Samuel Staples School. So John just projected on the screen so that you can see that one column, TLLF, are the temporary learners from home. I didn't modify that number to reflect all the students who were in quarantine because I thought that would be a false reading, but we do have 58 kids, K through 5, who learn from home all 5 days, and 11 students whose family have elected them to maintain the hybrid. So that's that data that I wanted to share with you. I do want to share that we started Informal Observations, and I've been in a 1st grade classroom to look at a math lesson. I saw in 4th grade, I saw a writing lesson. In kindergarten, I saw a reading lesson. And I had a really cool opportunity to substitute for a 4th grade teacher the other day because she needed to step out to do some online teaching for her kids who were learning from home. And I have been truly inspired. It's really quite a cool thing to see that in each of those observations, teachers project the faces of these kids who are learning at home. And with real talent, they can the teachers bounce between the kids at home who are raising hands, the kids who are physically in the room raising hands. I see opportunities for kids to get feedback. The teacher's referencing the downloadable activities that she has in the classroom. She sends them on their way. She's meeting with groups on her device. It's really quite a very cool thing to see. None of us, including them, none of us went to school to learn how to vacillate between distance learners and those that are physically in the room, but they're really doing it with such finesse. And I see all of the wonderful ingredients that you want to see in a solid lesson. You want to see that the teacher has talked a little bit about prior learning. You want the teacher to ask the kids, what do they remember? What is it that we're doing? She does a very direct, explicit instruction related to whatever the skill or the topic is. They practice a little bit and off they go. It's really quite cool. It is varying. Obviously, I shared with you different grade levels. It does vary for the kids to actually be on the device anywhere from like 15 minutes to about 35, I think was the longest that I've seen that they've been on the device. But know that those were just the core subjects that I saw. So then they hang up and then the teacher has another Zoom link for the next core subject area. So the kids could be on as much as 3 times, right? Reading, writing, and math. And in some cases 4, if they're doing some kind of like SEL lesson, a whole group meeting of some sort that they want to have a conversation about in terms of social emotional learning. So it's been really great. I'm so pleased by what I see. I see all of the daily lessons in the Google Classrooms, and they're getting everything as if it were a typical classroom day. The same amount of time is being devoted to reading, writing, and math, a little bit of science and social studies. So I've been really quite pleased. And the only other thing that I wanted to report on was to offer really a heartfelt thank you to our PTO. They, in partnership with one of the PTO liaisons, created this super cool help yourself shelf where they sent into our silo a ton of stuff, from really delicious snacks to Listerine things and Kleenex and hand sanitizer. And then on Thursday, they're sending in lunch for us to enjoy during Parent-Teacher Conference Week. So it's just really fantastic to have their support and them think so creatively to help our teachers feel appreciated. That's all I have.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions for Kim? Randy?
I've got one, I guess, and it's sort of, and I may ask this more than once tonight, but it's a question for Kim. It's a question for Dr. Harrison. When you look at the options that we have in town, and I know the decision that's been made for starting next Monday, but when the parents, the teachers, I guess, when you have the option to be all in, but as a parent, if you want your child to be home and temporary distance learning, or if you want them to be hybrid, is that not the best option? And I don't want to frame your answer, but for the community at large?
I'm not sure I understand your question. It's not the best option.
Are those 3 options to maintain all 3 of those options at all time?
From our perspective?
Yes.
It's very, very difficult. The teacher who I just referenced earlier, for whom I subbed, she has, in addition to the kids who are physically in the room, she has a Monday, Tuesday cohort, just come Monday, Tuesday. She has a Thursday, Friday cohort who just comes Thursday, Friday. And she has another cohort that doesn't come in. They're full 5-day distance learner. She has all of the cohorts imaginable. And she's having a very difficult time having the small groups with the kids who are home. So I'm subbing, we'll find people to cover her so that she can step out and do the direct instruction that she needs to do with those kids. It's very hard.
Okay, and that's fair. And I don't have an appreciation other than you explaining it in the way you did. How do we get to a point where, I mean, this isn't going to go away January 1st or, maybe by the end of the school year. We're still talking about this, hopefully not, but is there a solution, or are we just, it seems like we're kind of going around in circles and maybe searching for the best solution, I guess is the way to think about it from a productivity standpoint. What do you recommend? I mean, is it bouncing back from hybrid to all in, which isn't all in, as you just alluded to. We're all in today, but we're really not, right? Because we have 20% of the student population not all in, give or take. How do we?
That is such a hard question to answer, because the decision is being based on a health decision, right? So it'd be completely wrong for me to weigh in on why the decision's being made. As an educator, the hybrid model is the hardest model to manage for so many reasons. It's very difficult to organize who has what they need when they leave on Tuesday, because they don't, especially I have the little ones, right? You have everything you need, and many of them don't know how to download. So it really does become the responsibility of the parent.
Yeah.
Making certain that all kids are included, that all kids have connections with others. That's a real hardship on our kids. And honestly, the teachers are absolutely magnificent in how they're able to connect through these devices. Really effusive love for these kids. Wish they were here, but here's a close approximation of what I can do for you that these kids are enjoying here in the classroom. But in truth, the hybrid model is the hardest to pull off well.
All right, I'll relinquish my time back to John.
Any other questions from the board?
John, are we okay to kind of engage in discussion here with Kim or as a group, or?
I think so. I think, yeah, I think it's specific to what's going on at Samuel Staples right now. Absolutely.
Honestly, I feel so far removed from what it was like to be together in the media center at Keller. It just feels, I feel like I kind of lost, any kind of grounding in our usual process and discourse. I mean, I have to kind of echo Randy's question just about sort of, how long are we going to sustain this option of, and I know this, Kim, this isn't specifically a question for you because obviously there are so many others involved in making these decisions, but I kind of have to wonder, why did we extend that continuation of the hybrid model? And I think I might have even mentioned before, that in the beginning of the year I was on board but uncomfortable and not crazy about the hybrid in the month of September, knowing that it was going to come to an end. And that there was going to be, the cord was going to be cut in a way, and that there would be a distinction between two models, not three. And I could clearly understand from all of Stephanie's and everybody's work over the summer that the state mandated and expected us to provide an outline and a process for the three different models. But I don't remember any directive that said you have to offer all three, sort of like a menu to choose from. And I just think continuing that expectation on teachers as one who is living it, right? I'm not just kind of looking from the outside in. I'm teaching in a hybrid model right now myself. And as Kim said, it is a juggling act like no other. And the effectiveness of instruction is lost in many, many ways. It is just so hard to maintain. People have asked about the efficacy of instruction and, what are kids gaining, losing, whatever. I don't know. I mean, I wonder if we couldn't be more fluid about our classes and faculty, and maybe it needs to be more thought. Is it possible to say to families, you started the year with this teacher, you may not end the year with this teacher, that we sort of dispense our faculty in a more fluid manner within the grade levels, looking at the cohorts, who's in, who's out, who's remote, who's fully in it, and try to dedicate a person at each grade level who's going to work specifically with the distance learning. Are there ways that we can take our people and have them focused on those pullouts? Like Kim, you were saying, you were subbing so that a teacher could focus on one group versus another. I don't know. To Randy's question, what can we do? What would you suggest? And I would support any kind of radical change that you wanted to implement. that would streamline this and focus it better for kids and teachers and families. It's not really a question, so much of a statement, but.
I will say my heart skipped a beat when you said who you start with may not be the teacher you end with. I mean, elementary parents adore the teacher who is with their young child. I mean, that is, in many cases, it's a second parent who loves them in many ways as much as the parent does. I don't think that's the right thing to do for students. I think that the relationship between the student and the parent is a special one. And it's in every single case, it inspires the student to love learning and work hard.
Hey, Kim?
I just wondered if it started that way in the beginning, you know, if going into the school year at the end of the summer and the beginning of the year, that there was an understanding that based on the needs of how things progressed, that it might be more beneficial in other ways, that yes, you might sacrifice that relationship, but there could be some other real tangible benefits to shifting a student from one class to another.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I would weigh in here. And I mean, obviously I wasn't here at the time that all of these conversations were happening, but they were happening in districts all over the state, right? So there, in my previous district, we had a similar conversation, Jenny, about, you know, what if we had dedicated folks who were working with the students who were temporarily learning from home. The challenge there was because we knew that that wasn't that people weren't going to be locked into that situation, that there could be sort of this fluidity of moving in and out, which could then have imbalanced teaching loads, right? So how do you course correct for that? The other piece is, and I know that this was a big part of the discussion, was just around helping students, particularly our youngest students, not just to build close connections with their teachers, but to create connections with their classmates. So one of the biggest losses from the spring, in addition to the academic loss, was the social connections. And so if you could start the year knowing that you were a part of this classroom, whether you were learning from home or whether you were learning in person, that teachers working to establish those connections with students and then to foster those connections across students would be beneficial in the long run. So, you know, I know that was some of the conversation that I was involved in leading into the school year, considering what are the best models for us to look at this. You know, the question about maintaining the option for hybrid once we were going all in was really a way of addressing Randy's approach, where it was, you know, should every family sort of have their choice, where there's a little bit more ownership on the family side of what makes the most sense for their student and their particular family situation. And to Kim's point, it does bring up some unique issues for teachers. And the thing about it is that I think one of the things that's becoming more and more clear is that having kids learn virtually, it's not just, you know, we're obviously they're not just sort of tuning in, watching the instruction happen. From a pedagogical standpoint, it's and Jenny, you know this, it's the design of the lesson then has to be different based on your learning environment. And so, you know, to Kim's point, we're seeing that it is challenging the design part of it. You know, even though when I'm visiting classrooms from an execution standpoint, I know teachers make it look easy and, you know, they're going to keep smiling along and really connecting with kids because that's what our folks do. But the behind the scenes of it is, it does bring up some really unique challenges.
Kim?
Yep.
I will couch this question with, I really do get you really put a smile on my face when you send home these little notes to parents, the gentle reminders and the gee, just for your information. I go, oh God, she surely should work for the federal government, but probably teach them something. But how is the drop off and the pickup going? Do we still have cars that are out on Morehouse?
No.
Is it still taking 45 minutes to do it? Tell me how that's going.
It takes a solid 30 minutes.
30, yeah. Okay.
It takes 30 minutes. In truth, I'm outside at 3 o'clock. I'm taking photographs of all of the name cards.
Mhm.
Our afternoon staff is pretty spectacular. We've got one staff member in the front. She directs the 3 lanes. When the lanes are filled, the woman in the back on the bullhorn yells, "Lane 1, ready to go." We've got it down really, really well. And I honestly can't thank them enough. You know, the whole idea of dismissing this number of kids just was inconceivable. And everybody tried something new. We just kept adjusting and adjusting and adjusting, and we finally got it right. Thank you for asking. I'm very, very proud of how it finally ended up.
Excellent. Thanks, Gil.
Any other questions for Kim?
Don, I just wanted to respond again a little bit to some of the things. Dr. Harrison, I appreciate all of your comments. I still think, to your point about discussion and planning for this, there still is an imbalance in teacher load because of the 3 different models and the way it's distributed. That definitely hasn't been solved under the current mode of things. We've got teachers who have no students at home. We have teachers who are teaching all 3 models and who are absolutely taxed to the hilt. And communities can be formed and fostered under any circumstance. You know, if you had a group of distance learners with a dedicated teacher, that could become a community, you know, in and of itself. I don't think while I appreciate and understand that families who are choosing to keep their children home want that sense of connection could be fostered with other students who are also temporarily learning from home. Or that perhaps there could be faculty who are devoted to instruction, to specific aspects of the remote instruction that would maybe be less of an impact on kind of slowing the overall progress of things. I guess that's my biggest concern, is as everybody is the overall academic progress of all of our kids, I think is really paramount when we're making these decisions.
Okay. Devin.
Yeah, one thing that I do as we go to the hybrid model, and I mean, I'm hopefully, fingers crossed, we don't have to go full out, but it seems somewhat inevitable at this point, is just really thinking about the protocols for giving feedback on student work. It is so hard in a virtual setting when the kids are like doing the work, even when you submit it into the Google Classroom, like that real time, you know, evidence of like our students learning, our students growing. And of course, I recognize key is like keep kids safe and healthy, right? Then it's like emotional, mental health. You know, academics is all part of that. But I think that feedback loop piece and how parents are involved. And I know this is all new for everybody, so I'm not, but just like, what is the plan and protocol for that? Because I mean, I have a 2nd grader and a kindergartner, so I recognize that I'm at the like, the really hard part of like really young kids. And so trying to think about too, like, what am I looking for as a parent? How do I know that they're growing in the right ways? What does 2nd grade work look like? And just thinking, you know, and I think a lot of families are kind of saying a similar thing around like, well, what am I supposed to be doing? And like, is my kid growing fast enough? Is this working? And like, how do I know that would be helpful?
Okay. All right. Thank you. That takes us to Sue.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I appreciate a comment that Jenny made about how awkward it feels that we're not at Keller's Media Center having these meetings, and we're adults. So I want everyone to think about the feelings and the emotions of middle school kids, as well as we're going through this, which is really difficult because this is their time of learning and growing, and it's so socially connected as well, interrelated. On Sunday evening, I have to tell you, I had this really crazy dream that we would never get a case at Helen Keller Middle School. We worked so hard to have all our protocols ready. People are following it, but this is a very difficult virus, as John mentioned, one we haven't seen in 100, and maybe the worst we've seen beyond that. And so it was quite a shock. And I just want to acknowledge and recognize and empathize with parents and staff who got this news. And as Rydell mentioned earlier, the contact tracing took place on Monday, and everyone was holding their breath to find out if they were impacted. And I want to just recognize how unnerving that was for our whole community. As the principal, I kind of I'm known to take on the stress for people because it hurts me to find people in such stress. So as a result of our first case, 95 students out of 100 sixth graders are now home for 2 weeks. And it's the mood in the school today as students came in, the 7th and 8th graders, it was palpable that it was different and people are nervous. And we have to get the children back to the point of feeling comfortable being in school and knowing that we're doing everything we can to prevent another case. But it seems that that's not preventable. It's going to happen again. And we'll just handle it the way we've handled all these other cases as a district, but just want to recognize how difficult it's been for everybody. Prior to yesterday, I would have reported to you the cases. Last month, I gave you the numbers of the split between how many people how children are in school on Monday and Tuesday. And I just want to report that again. The numbers are not very different from last month, but there's a lot of what you don't hear in the numbers are the number of switches. So there are a lot of families that call the school through the proper channels and want to switch. And let's say they were all in and pull back to hybrid. So it's a difficult process having all 3 models as well for attendance purposes, especially at the middle school level where there's multiple classes and teachers in a given day. So right before our first case, it was 85% of the students were all in, 8% at hybrid, and 7% still select temporary learning from home. On Monday and Tuesdays, these numbers have shifted a little bit, but we have had 89% of our student population in the building. Wednesday was 84%, and Thursday and Friday, 88%. So it's that's the data that I wanted to share. And again, now we have 95 students added on to that temporary learning from home for the quarantine. So aside from the weight I feel that we had the case, I know it wasn't, it just weighs on me, but we'll do everything we can to make sure that we can prevent another case or do the best we can. I want to, on a nice note, share that the PTA gave us money last month that was accepted by the Board of Ed, and all the teacher voice amplifiers arrived last week. They've been distributed to all the teachers. It is wonderful to hear the strength of the teachers' voices and know that the students at home and the students, no matter where they're sitting in the classroom, can hear every word that the teachers are saying. So thank you again for the PTO. On Friday, we did get snacks that were delivered by the PTO. So thank you for doing that. And Beth, I see your face. So thank you for bringing them early in the morning. I believe it was you on Friday. On Tuesday, November 3rd, I just wanted to share what the teachers were involved in for professional development that day. Our world language teachers were working across virtually across town with their counterparts, discussing technology that would be helpful in different modes of operation this year for student learning. Our social studies and ILA teachers, along with some SPED teachers, had a dyslexia training. Each of these trainings were half of the day. Our music teachers worked with their colleagues in Reading and Easton, ER9 and Reading, with a consultant arranged by Stephanie Pearson-Hugal on music instruction through distance learning as well. And then one of the most wonderful professional developments I personally attended, along with about 10 to 15 teachers in our building who were not otherwise involved in these other trainings, was on diversity, equity, and inclusion offered by CES. And there was a large menu of smorgasbord by the section that we could each choose for sessions, and it blew me away. It blew me away in what we can do to better support students in our school. It blew me away in terms of, there was a student panel at the end of students from other districts, and they spoke so eloquently about how it felt to be in their schools and the connections and how important it was to have a connection in the classroom, in the school, to make everyone feel included. And it was truly a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for myself. I know Annie attended a bunch of sessions as well as did many staff members. And then in the afternoons or half of the day, teachers were asked to start preparing a checklist. We gave them a starter checklist, and then we asked them to start preparing a checklist, knowing that at any moment we have to pivot. We know we're pivoting now on Monday, and then we're going to, if we have to further pivot to all out, which I hope we don't have to do, because it's been so wonderful to have the kids in the schools and watching them enjoy each other's company and be a community of learners in classrooms. But in any event, so they had half the day, the teachers, to start preparing for what is our bag that we need to take home, including the webcams and all that, and be ready to teach out of the school. Informal observations have begun in our school as well, as Kim mentioned, and what has been observed in classrooms is, I'm going to use the word joy, because that's what is being seen. Kids are laughing, teachers are laughing, they're engaging with each other, and it's quite wonderful to see. Similar to Kim explaining how the teachers are making it look effortless. It's not effortless. And I just want to applaud them, all the teachers again, because they are making it look like they've been doing it for years, and they've not been doing it for years. And the growth that all of them have made since the beginning, when they came back from their summer break to where they are today, is amazing. And I'm very proud of them. And I'm very proud of the kids who are staying engaged from home, who are staying engaged in the classrooms. And there's a lot for this community to be proud of in terms of how this pandemic is kind of not getting in the way of the joyful learning that happens in the school. And with that, I leave myself open to any questions, comments that you have, or answers I could give.
Thank you, Sue. Questions for Sue? Jeff?
So I talked about this earlier, and I sent you some information about the issue of the 50 minutes or 50 minutes 4 days a week and 30 minutes 1 day a week for Pride, and then 20 or 25 minutes for home base. What's your sense about the learning opportunity that might exist if we were to move some of that time back into the classroom?
So Jeff, I'm not sure if you've been the longest standing board member. Maybe you are. I don't recall. You know that the emphasis that our school has had on creating a developmentally appropriate environment for this age of students. When I was growing up, I didn't go to a middle school. I went to a junior high school that was very just driven class, 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 get ready for high school. And in this pandemic environment at this moment, I think I'm very comfortable right now that students are coming into the building, that we're providing them ample time to get into the building safely, to leave the building safely, to be organized, and recognizing that not all students have the same needs. And so I'm comfortable right now with what we're providing in terms of the balance between the needs academically and the needs of kids for organizational skills, executive functioning, social emotional, and some enrichment that the teams are starting to provide. So I'm comfortable right now. We have been responsive and moved some things around since we began the school year. We'll continue to keep monitoring that based on the model that we're in. But I feel that we are providing a very good and balanced approach to what a middle school should be for this age group of students.
So then you're comfortable that the curriculum that for each grade level, each subject matter and in each grade level is going to be covered sufficiently so that next year when they move on, that they'll be in a solid academic place?
I can tell you in speaking with the teachers and our specialists that we're in a very good place right now. Having had school in person these many weeks and full in since October 5th. The curriculum, the teachers are comfortable in now understanding what the needs of the students are now that their diagnostic assessments are done and are moving ahead in a proper differentiation and the curriculum. Jeff, I can't give guarantees because tomorrow is unknown in terms of what any of us we know on Monday we're going hybrid, and I can't give you a guarantee, but I know that we are making everyone is making the best effort to make sure that the children are ready for their next level, their next grade.
Okay.
Thank you, Sue. And thank you also just to all the teachers. I mean, certainly as I've heard sixth grade teachers, and my boys love every teacher. They've just thoroughly enjoyed every class. They're so excited about every topic. Like I've been kind of surprised by it. Like oftentimes I'm the one who's in the way these days. So I'm like, hey, did you do this? Don't worry about it. I got this. I'm like, well, show me. And then they start showing me. I'm like, all right, never mind. You got it. So really good stuff there. Sorry, any other comments for Sue or questions for Sue? Or Randy?
Sure, John. Yeah, I mean, well, I'm going to go a different tact, I guess. So when we did some testing, Sue, in the last couple of months to sort of level set where everybody sort of finished last year and where we are this year. Is there anything you can share with the board either tonight or next meeting?
Next meeting, I'd be happy to gather some data for you and present that.
Okay. Do you have it now? Not to say you have to share it tonight, but do you already have it? Is that all compiled or are you still compiling it?
No, it is compiled. It's in the hands of the teachers. The teachers are using it to inform their next lessons. So it's available to the teachers. It has been completed, but I don't have it in front of me. And you know me, I like to speak accurately. So I would not want to misspeak.
In broad terms, how would you say we finished the year last year? Based on what you've seen with the testing, not getting into details or numbers or specifics, but I mean kind of like
wide variety. I'll answer that generally in a broad stroke. We found what we expected in that during the March to end of the year experience last year, which was not synchronous instruction, there was a wide variety. Some students missed instruction, some students became advanced in instruction. And that's what we expected to see, and that is what we see. So there's a wider range of abilities at the moment, and hopefully with all the people we have on staff to provide remediation, which is not a lot of people, but the children have been identified, and also the expertise of the teachers to differentiate for the different groups of students in their care. I think we'll make it.
Okay, and I'll go back, I guess, to what Jeff said. I mean, I mentioned this last board meeting. I don't know if this comes out of the category that we don't have a choice. It sounds like we don't at this point, but you know, give or take an hour and a half to 2 hours a day that used to be a combination of either instruction or ELT mixed in there. You know, a good chunk of the Pride, Home Base, and SOAR, 2/3 of that time is sort of lost instruction time that we don't get back every day. So, but listen, we're heading in the wrong direction right now from hybrid. So it's tough to say we need to change it because we're going backwards right now instead of forward. So.
Yeah, but I just want to give you one concrete example of something that you wouldn't know because you don't see it every day. Like a simple thing, we are handing out a Chromebook at the beginning of every day to a student to carry around for the rest of the day. Because we made that decision because we didn't want children touching each other's Chromebooks that were left in a classroom. So we're handing out Chromebooks, children are taking them from class to class, and then at the end of the day, the students are asked to wipe them down, to clean them off. They have to plug them back into the chargers. These things take time, in addition to having the students clean the desk surface area before they leave every classroom. Things take time in order to make sure that we can keep the school environment sanitary and safe, and have students moving at different times, have enough time in the schedule to clean every tabletop that students have lunch in on top of. And all these things take time, Randy. And I know that I could only imagine it's really hard if you've not been in the building to see it on a daily basis. And everything has to be done under the guidelines that we've been given by the state in order to make sure we can get through this pandemic as safe as possible.
Okay, you know, I get it. I have an 8th grader. I see it through his eyes every day. We have conversations about it. So I do have a sense without being there what's happening. I'm not going to belabor the point. I've made the point twice in the last 2 meetings. So that's fine. We'll move on.
Gretchen.
Sue, if we do have to go full remote, will the schedule for middle school change? Will the kids still be doing kind of what they're doing now, where they have their block schedules?
Yes, it'll be basically the same. If we find we need to, I've said this from the get-go, from the summertime, open to making adjustments as needed, which we have made since the beginning of that this began. But we'd like to provide the same, not change the schedules all over again, because we expect to keep moving from model to model based on the data of the virus, right? So we want, it's been very difficult for kids who need to have routine. You know, we haven't had much routine, right? And so we want to try to preserve the routine as much as possible, and provide this time around those synchronous instruction, of course, which will be very different than we experienced back in March, from March to June.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
John, I just had a quick comment to kind of go along with Jeff and Randy. So, and I feel bad, I don't want you to feel like this is kind of an ongoing sort of negative campaign here, but I just need to echo that I'm also hearing concerns from the community about lost instruction time. And that I don't know that all families feel like these periods of time are serving all students. necessary and appreciated by groups of students who are benefiting from certain services, but maybe not serving students who, you know, who are just in a different place. And when you say things like cleaning desks and clean, you know,
What I meant by that was excuse me, at the beginning and at the end of a period, but go on.
Okay, at the beginning and the end of a period, which makes me even more concerned that those instructional periods are shorter. Like I would think that we would want to lengthen them, add in 5 or 10 minutes to each of the instructional periods to allow for those things to happen, but not cut into the instructional time. Since we have these other blocks of the day that are non-instructional, and we're saying there are extra procedures that kids and teachers have to follow during these instructional periods, but there's less of it. So that just kind of compounds the concern for me about overall instructional time. But to your point, having not been in the building and seeing exactly what goes on, I would love the opportunity to maybe just, you know, one-on-one understand, you know, more deeply and from your and Annie's perspective, kind of the intricacies of what you're facing. And then the other point that really struck me in the beginning and is a question that I just kind of generally have for our community and our school system is, when did we shift from the response from, what's the word I'm looking for? When did we shift from safety protocols and minimizing risk to the notion that we are responsible for the complete prevention of all transmission? I'm hearing more and more, and I feel like our decisions more and more, and our conversation more and more is shifting to, we need to do that. The choices we're making are to prevent anybody from contracting or anybody from testing positive. And that concerns me. That concerns me on a lot of levels to hear it discussed at that level, because I just don't think it's the school system's responsibility to prevent 100% of risk and 100% of positive cases.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I would agree with you. I mean, I don't think that there is an opportunity for us to absolutely prevent. I think that what we're doing is thinking about ways to minimize the risk, to your point. So I would agree with that, Jenny.
If I can, Sue and Annie, I would love to, I think next meeting, our December meeting, if we could carve some time out for us to address, I think Randy and Jeff and Jenny, I think members of the community raising the concern about sort of lost opportunity for, you know, sort of trying to achieve as much as we can is reasonable academically. I think it's, you know, it's worth discussing. And if there are, I mean, I know no one's sitting around going, anyone have some extra work for me right now? But if between now and next month, we can brainstorm so that if we are able to get back in person, you know, sort of outside of hybrid and sort of get back to this in a serious way, we can maximize that time in as creative a way as possible. I mean, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to create some sort of pocket of learning that can happen inside of those sort of times at the beginning and the end for students who are, you know, sort of, you know, enthusiastic about pursuing that. I don't know, and here's not the right place to throw out every option, but I think there's definitely, you know, an opportunity for us to sort of put our heads together and try to come up with something. Okay, any other comments for Sue or Annie? Okay, that takes us to Dr. Pearson-Ugal.
Thank you. My report is going to help us to pivot, shift gears a little bit in our meeting toward an annual process that's known to all very well, and that is the educator evaluation system. I'd like to this evening present a view of educator evaluation in the time of a pandemic. So as we know, the typical evaluation process was suspended and then ultimately end of year summative ratings waived last spring by the State Department of Education. And this year, the state has offered all public school districts flexibility in the implementation of educator evaluation. So our ER9 Professional Development and Evaluation Committee met in September and discussed those flexibilities and really talked about the best ways to measure student learning and where the focus should be this year, and how to support teachers in their work to support our students. And again, how to give teachers feedback through the evaluation process. So what I'd like to do is just speak briefly about the focus that the state recommends and what ER9 has decided to adopt this year. Which is that the focus will be on social and emotional learning, student engagement, and family engagement. And that is not to say at all for one moment that we do not care about academics, but we believe so strongly that by effectively engaging our students, all students, in many different ways, that will in turn lead to greater gains in all areas. But acknowledging that we are in a very different time, and the stress that is on our children, on our families, has an effect on learning. It is important for us to acknowledge that and then really to embrace that in our evaluation system, so that the teachers can keep that in mind as they create their student learning objectives and they consider how best to measure student learning. And that will include some traditional measures as well as measures that are probably not standardized, but are more anecdotal or observational. The teacher evaluation process will be similar to the way that it is in usual years, except that the formal observations that would usually take place using the rubrics within our evaluation system will be informal observations this year. They will all be scheduled, and evaluators, our building administrators and special education administrators, will come into teachers' classrooms either in person, if we are in person, or online. So it might be that your child's classroom from time to time includes a tile that is an administrator in the building. And I hope that that's something that occurs even outside of observations, that evaluators and possibly even central office members are popping in from time to time to get a sense of what's happening in our classrooms, both remotely and then also in person. And the administrator evaluation will also have a similar focus, in that it will be on the reopening in schools and how we can support the well-being of students as well as teachers in this year. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions, but this really leads us then into the school building goals and some examples of what teacher goals might include this year, as well as any collaborative goals.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute and keep the presentation going. As Stephanie said, that's a good segue into the discussion about the school goals. We want to just start with an overview of the vision and mission, and then dig down from there into the school-specific goals.
If I may I read the vision and the mission? I think it's important noting really closely the language that's in both the vision and mission, because they relate so closely to the Samuel Staples goal for the year. We envision our schools as warm, supportive, inclusive communities that develop the intellectual, physical, social, and emotional assets of all learners. We see ourselves as caring individuals embracing creative collaboration on campus and with and throughout Easton and Reading. The mission, in partnership with the communities, the mission of ER9 is to educate and nurture our students as they grow into self-directed, knowledgeable, critical thinkers, and compassionate, engaged community members.
Following those, the Tri-District has enduring goals and aspirations. Dr. Harrison referred to them in a previous meeting, and we call them the ABCs. A stands for academic excellence. All students will grow as engaged and active thinkers, able to communicate, question, collaborate, problem solve, innovate, and wonder. The B stands for building a caring community. Each member of our community will contribute to our dynamic and enriching environment by promoting healthy relationships with others and sharing unique talents for the advancement of all. Cultivating future-ready learners. All students will be ready to continue their lifelong education, establish a career path of their own desire, adapt to change, possess social skills, and act as informed citizens.
So, well, first let me read to you the goal, which is different than you've seen in the past. During the 2020-21 school year, students will explore the theme of diversity. I'm sorry, the little picture thing is in the way. Hold on a second. Okay. During the 2020-21 school year, students will explore the theme of diversity and engage in discussions and tasks that broaden their understanding of and respect for people who come from different races, socioeconomic backgrounds, follow different religions, religious traditions, speak different languages, and see all individuals as unique and valuable. As a result of this work, students will demonstrate empathy by intentionally seeking to understand another's perspective or points of view and respecting each person's differences. If you could just flip to the rationale, I'll speak anecdotally while it's being projected. A lot has changed at the Samuel Staples community in terms of its demographics, in terms of the learners. And last spring, or maybe it was winter, you might recall that one of the parents reached out in public comment, Mrs. Fayak. She is such an incredibly inspiring individual with really great intentions, and reached out to say, in addition to herself, that there's a group of families that really want to see a concerted effort to be focused around authentic forms of diversity. And along with putting money into a very wonderful donation, a lot was changing in our society. And I was really quite surprised by the number of kids who either have engaged in conversation about, you know, what's going on in our society, particularly related to our election, but the rancor that's kind of gone on, maybe through the media as they're walking through the family room and hearing the television set, or I don't know, that I was paying attention to kids talking in the cafeteria when they don't know that I'm listening, but I'm really eavesdropping on all of their conversations, and hearing them assert strong beliefs about different leaders and feeling as though they had a full understanding of what was going on, and watching kids sort of nod, not fully understanding, but didn't really know where to go with it, but knew that Florida was the best state. You know, really interesting things that were going on. And in truth, folks, the demographics at Samuel Staples have changed quite a bit in the last 3 years. And I felt so strongly about the topics that have changed that I invited a professional development opportunity to Samuel Staples at the end of October on one of those Wednesday minimum days called Welcoming Schools. And I had done some research on what they provide in terms of professional development for students who are transgender. And I have found our faculty to be really interested, because we certainly know that students who identify in a gender different than the one they were assigned at birth, they're protected certainly by civil rights and by Title IX, but they deserve more than just protection. Those kids do need to have teachers who are informed, are sensitive, and are welcoming. Students of different races who speak different languages. We have 24 students, folks, who are English learners, who need support by our EL teacher. It might look very homogeneous in our school, but it's really not. And it was really important to me that at this time, it was the right time to really dig deep into understanding different kinds of diverse backgrounds. And so the focus is really going to be about, how do you seek to understand? What questions do you ask so that you have a better understanding of somebody's ideas or values or backgrounds and respect it? The second step curriculum talks an awful lot about empathy, and individual teachers, and actually wonderful teams of teachers, worked on empathy through the second step curriculum, and certainly tried to use that refrain of walking in someone's shoes. And I think the kids probably do demonstrate empathy for small things. But when it's something that's so deep in the soul of somebody that they don't feel valued because they either look different or identify different or have different interests that are not your typical stereotypical activities, they need to be met by teachers and classmates. It's good for you, it's fine for me. So the rationale that I wrote relates to all that I just shared with you. This year, in a welcoming school, people are appreciated. They feel safe and see themselves represented throughout the building. And to ensure this, we need to be more deliberate about our practices in order to support a welcoming environment. Teachers will examine diversity in the classroom and the school at large, engage in learning about many forms of diversity, reflect on the degree to which classroom resources support diverse perspectives, and look for opportunities to embed diverse perspectives into lessons and model how one seeks to understand the perspective of others. We want SSES students to develop the skills that help them to become global citizens. To be successful in this world, our students need to understand that they will engage with people who are different than themselves or different from themselves. Students need to be taught how to seek and respect the point of view of others. And in the next slide, Dr. Harrison, some of our action steps are underway. I just shared briefly that in October, we did have training by the Welcoming Schools organization from Boston. In the month of March, I've made arrangements to have additional, with the funding that Mrs. Fayak and her team donated to Samuel Staples, to provide training from diversity, equity, and inclusion training from CES. I found this organization called Empatico this summer that really appealed to me. It is an organization that connects classrooms, K-5 classrooms, with other K-5 classrooms from across the world. It's a safe platform and they do all the work for you. They arrange connections. They even pay attention to time zones so that we can actually get this off the ground. And we are so good with virtual conferencing now as a result of this pandemic that I think it's the perfect time for kids to have video conferencing with kids from other countries and practice asking questions so that they build an understanding of the background of the people with whom they're speaking. With the donation, classroom teachers have already put in fantastic requests for books that have diverse themes in them by authentic, diverse authors. Teachers in some grade levels, not all so far, have agreed on read alouds to read to the students. We have a diversity committee at Samuel Staples. One of the things I'd like to charge them with is to create a kindness bulletin board with sticky notes so that they can acknowledge people for who they are and their wonderful contributions simply because they're good enough. That's our goal.
That always helps. At Helen Keller Middle School, as a community of educators, we have embarked on a journey to help students during the time of this global pandemic. To transition from surviving to thriving, we will target our work this year on developing the technological and instructional skills needed to engage learners, promote personal growth, and support the emotional well-being of all school community members. The goals for our school community this year will focus on 3 key areas: student engagement, technological skill development, and social emotional learning, support of learners and colleagues. Through the following action steps, which I'll show you in a moment, we aim to build our capacity to implement social and emotional learning and support into all modes of education during this unique year, as well as ensure personal growth for all educators in the area of educational technology that supports the new models of education for students. Furthermore, work this year aims to build the capacity of staff to support students of all religions, races, sexual orientation, gender identity expression, national origin, or disability, so that every student feels included and valued as a member of our school community. John, if you could just advance, please. Oh, Rydell's got it? Okay. So there's 2 pages of action steps going along 3 columns that you'll see. And I won't read every one to you, but we have already accomplished some of these along these 3 columns. First, on the left of student engagement and blended learning models, technological and instructional skill development, and social emotional learning. I don't think you want me to read every column, but if you could move on, Dr. Harrison, to the next slide as well. It's rather robust. I will tell you that our entire staff is linking into this particular school goal. It is something that we have begun thinking about and working on in terms of social and emotional learning for sure, and building relationships with every student is work that Helen Keller Middle School staff embarked in. Probably we started this over 7 years ago. It's something that is very near and dear to us, and knowing that if we make those connections with every student, and every student feels that they have a trusted adult that they know has their back, that can help them problem solve and help them grow, that we know that they're going to soar in terms of their growth educationally. And so this is something we've invested a lot of time in, and we're actually all really excited using the governor's lead to take this waiver to focus our attention on this because it is so important. I was struck when I started taking the Yale course that's offered to every faculty member in our district. I was struck by a statistic that Mark Brackett, who some of you may have heard of, he's works on the Yale staff, and he developed something called the Ruler program about social and emotional learning and helping students recognize their feelings and make them better able to learn in a school environment, in any environment. I was struck by the statistic he had about how the majority of students didn't feel connected in pretty much many surveys that he's given. And this is something that we have been working very hard on over the past few years and will continue to do that. But this goal as a school goal is much more layered than that alone, as you can see. On the next page, we have ways in which we're going to show evidence that we've made some, that we've achieved this goal. In order to track progress in the area of student engagement, we're going to analyze trends of student attendance percentages for all models of school this year to make sure students are engaged or increasing in their engagement, and student personal growth in the areas of reading and math as measured by NWEA assessments, classroom achievement, and other internal assessments that we use. In order to measure the effectiveness of the social and emotional support for students, we'll analyze and compare a comparison of unscheduled counseling requests and needs as compared to last year. As you know, we had some data on that we shared with the board last year prior to closing. And all certified staff will be expected to meet district technology competency supported by professional development opportunities as measured by administrative observations, confirming the expected use of the educational technology that we're using to engage all learners during this very unique year.
Any questions? Okay.
John, does it just for Sue, or can we go back to SSES also?
I think for the whole topic, yeah, for I think both.
Okay.
Yep.
Kim, I absolutely love the parts about modeling for students how to seek another's perspective, and just discussing it as a skill that needs to be taught. That really struck me. I'd never thought of it in those specific terms before. And my question, you mentioned the second step program, and just things have so changed and intensified in this area, and there's such a meaningful focus on it right now. And we, I don't remember how long ago it was that the second step funding went through and that program was implemented, but I guess my question now is it enough? And is it a flexible program? Does second step, are they coming out with modules that, that support this, or anything that could be added to it to help with goals specifically in this area? I mean, I know we can sort of adapt and modify, and, teachers do amazing things, but, in thinking about budgeting and looking at that program, if there's anything that we can provide you with additional, resources that would be a support, maybe between now and when we really embark on budget season, please let us know.
Thank you, Jenny. Any additional comment? Okay. All right, that takes us to agenda item 6B, SSES ELF donation for $2,100 for kindergarten yoga instruction. Kim, would you like to give a little bit of color on this?
I'd love to provide color on this. We've had for the last couple of years a former Samuel Staples parent who is a certified yoga instructor work with one kindergarten class for a couple of years now. And this kindergarten teacher has been so incredibly impressed by the impact that this, I think it's bi-monthly, I think it's twice a month, the impact of these yoga activities and have had on her kindergarten students. I mean, beyond things like balance and coordination, it's helped kids to sort of stop and think, that whole mindfulness movement, to think about ways to calm themselves and to recenter themselves, to self-regulate themselves. Well, she could not stop speaking about the incredible impact that Lisa Sheehan has had on her students. So all 5 of the kindergarten teachers approached ELF this year to ask for funding, which is $2,100, to ask her to come and work with the entire kindergarten group. And she's already started, to be completely frank with you. She already started working in September, October. And in fact, I just saw her today. It's very cool. She's out there in the field. She's mic'd up so that the kids can hear them. She is using all sorts of activities that nobody could argue with, that are so engaging and invigorating for the kids. But her voice just complements so beautifully that idea of pausing and thinking about what your body's doing and shutting off the rest of the world so that you can center yourself. I love it, and I thoroughly support it, and hope the Board of Ed would consider approving such a donation.
Thank you, Kim. The chair will entertain a motion to accept with gratitude the donation from the Easton Learning Foundation in the amount of $2,100 for yoga instruction for kindergartners.
So moved.
Thank you, Jeff. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, Devin. I wanted to give it to you, but Randy had such style. Randy seconds. Any discussion? All right. Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That's a unanimous. Thank you very much, Easton Learning Foundation, for your generous donation. All right. That moves us to item 6C, the ratification of the Easton Educators Association agreement with the Board of Education. So first, I want to say thank you to our negotiating team, Dr. Harrison, Vicki Cram, Scott Rice, Jeff Parker, Randy Hicks, who joined me in countless hours of planning and negotiating sessions, at least one that went until 3 a.m. I would also say thank you to Heather Murray and John Macaluso and the many other educators who represented the EEA. They represented our teachers very well and worked with us in a spirit of collaboration. We are pleased to say that we've reached an agreement on a contract for the next 3 years, and the EEA has ratified with its membership. And so at this point, I would look for a motion to approve the contract between the Easton Board of Education and the Easton Education Association for the period of July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2024, and authorize the chairperson to execute the agreement.
So moved.
I think Randy got to it first. And Jeff, are you going with the second, or was that Gretchen?
I think it was Gretchen.
Okay, thank you. So Randy motions and Gretchen seconds. Any discussion? All board members received the copy of the contract and comps and sort of all of that. Hearing none, I'll call the question. Gretchen? Thank you. Randy? All right.
Yep. All right.
Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. Jeff?
Aye.
Thank you. Jenny?
Yes.
Thank you. Devin? Yeah, I see the hand raised. That's aye. I vote yes. The motion passes 6-0. Thank you, everyone.
There's a typo in my minutes there. You probably saw the same, John.
Eaton Educators?
Yeah.
That one? Yeah, I noticed that too. I think the motion should reflect that it says Easton. Okay. Very good. So that takes us to overview of the budget process. This is not going to be painful, I hope. I think this will be pretty straightforward. Bear with me as I share my screen. Okay. So we started a process last year that I think really helped us to sort of build some momentum around sort of that, sort of moving from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. I think the one change that we would look to see here is this sort of consolidation of the sort of highlighting of the sort of contractual and healthcare obligations. We were doing that before. We sort of did the sort of contractual obligations in November and then the healthcare conversation in December. But I think we'll be able to combine those in December, also with the benefit of our just approved new board or new director of finance and operations. We'll look forward to having his contribution to those conversations very much. Can't get here soon enough. So the idea will be that we will have the sort of beginning of the conversations during our December timeframe where we will talk about the contractual obligations in healthcare that goes across, whether we're talking about contracts for food services, ventilation, or the Easton Educator Association or administrators contracts, et cetera. Then in January, we would focus on conversations around positions and programs, where we would talk about the specific goals that in some ways we heard tonight, and anything that would come with those, the professional development necessary, any investment that we would need to make in terms of materials, any investment we need to make to support those goals. And then certainly we want to make a part of our conversations a strategic a goal, right? So we don't want to simply be looking at, sort of the current year ahead of us and not making strategic investments that help us move towards something that we could consider a North Star that will inform our investments over many years. So we want to make sure that that's baked into the conversation as well. Certainly that will also include conversations related to professional development, curriculum development, and programming. We would also, inside of the positions and programming conversation, talk about enrollment projections, talk about special education and junior bridges programs, adjustments we would want to make, anything that we think would be beneficial to making sure that we're sort of teeing up the sort of positions and programs in the way that we think is necessary. In February, we would begin the sort of putting all the puzzle pieces together. So all those things we talked about before, which constitutes a huge percentage of the overall budget, but making sure that we're crossing our T's, dotting our I's, and including things like professional services, where we often see sort of, significant bills, property, plant, and equipment investments, substitutes, like every line that has sort of meaning in that budget, we need to make sure that we're looking at and we're considering, and that'll be a part of our February review. And then finally in March, we would plan to submit to the Board of Finance, and we all know what that process is like, who have been here before: present, review, revise, and that would be the process as I think we plan to lay it out. So I'll stop the share and see, are there any questions or comments from our board?
Maybe I
want you
missed
to take off the revise part at the very end.
From your lips, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would be good. I'll strike that. All right. Yes, Randy.
Maybe I missed this in the beginning, but are we starting with a budget that sort of Dr. Harrison and the administrators put together, and then, or are we starting from scratch, so to speak?
So when we interviewed Clarence, we did talk a little bit about zero-based budgeting, and I think it warrants a little bit of additional conversation. I think I'm comfortable with that approach, and that we sort of start from that. And I think we got to get into the conversations with Clarence, and I think we'll probably need some special meetings to sort of dive into that approach so that we can all get comfortable with it. But you know, I hope that we can get there. I don't want to speak. I don't want to say the decision has been made, because I think it's an important decision that the board needs to consider and discuss.
Okay, but and maybe I'm not ask my question correctly. In years past, Tom would make a board presentation. Here's the budget. Here's the sort of the wish list, and then we kind of go back and forth. Is that the process or not the process this year? Just at the very onset.
Yeah. So I think the sort of first conversation that we project is in December, where we're not really talking about wish list items, right? We're talking about contractual obligations. The next conversation in January would be where we start talking about programs, and that's where I think you would see a lot of the wish list items show up. So I think we have some room to decide whether or not we want to start from zero and add on to that. And I think we tried that a little bit last year. And I know that in prior years, it was more the administration coming to us. But I honestly, I don't want to say the decision has been made how we're going to do this, because we have a new director of finance and operations who's coming in. He has a point of view. I want to sort of hear from him, but I also want all of us on the board to be able to have that conversation with him and with Dr. Harrison, and to decide how we want to proceed.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so. I think what you're saying is that we're like, the administration's not going to present a budget to us and then we're going to tear it apart. We're going to take a step back and say, how do we want to initiate the first budget?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable approach, right? And I think we have time, because in December, we're not talking about, hey, do we feel like we want to pay for the contracts that we've signed? I mean, that's not really a conversation, right?
No, I agree. Okay.
John,
Yes.
couple of quick things.
Please.
On our budget object summary, we are tracking about 1% better than what we were at this point last year. That comes out to $170,000. And the what we've spent on COVID relief, I'll just call it that, looks to be about half of what we had that we agreed to.
Yep.
And that 170 would slide right in and take care of that burden. So I think we're gonna come through that pretty well. And Vicki also sent a note out about insurance, that our claims this past month was something in the neighborhood of 236,000. That's a little more than what we've experienced the first couple of months, but we're still tracking about $30,000 better than what we did last year after the first quarter. So I would say that we're certainly moving in the right direction.
Any questions?
That was just Scott's
Kevin?
report.
Yeah, thank you. I think we owe you $1,000.
Well, no, you don't.
No? All right. Okay. Yeah, anyone have detailed questions for Jeff about the accounting of how all those numbers came? No? Okay. Devin? Oh, you're on mute.
Devin, you're on mute.
I'm muted on the computer. I think last year the Board of Ed reached out to the Board of Finance and invited them to some of these meetings, just like might be a
Yes.
good.
That's absolutely the
do.
intent. Yep.
Yeah, and there's been a change or two on the Board of Finance, so it would be good to engage the new chair and certainly have him or whoever he designates to be a part of these meetings.
And the good news is we record them. So even if they can't attend in person, they can watch the replay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Randy, the joke you just made was on mute.
No, I've got a participant on the other side of this thing that's giving me questions. And I can't listen and think at the same time.
All right.
Sorry.
Very good. All right. I think unless there's additional questions or comments, I think that takes us right into E, which is public comment. Okay, I see Tracy Carlucci.
Hi, John.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi. I just wanted to follow up with Jenny's comments earlier and thank her for advocating for the temporarily learning from home kids. My daughter Ella's in first grade. She's home maybe for the whole school year. The current system, we're making it work, but it's really not fair for the teachers, as people have noted, and for the kids at home. There's no community whatsoever. You know, I've heard the arguments for why they have to stay with their, you know, class and not have separate remote learning teachers. But there's no opportunity to socialize on Zoom like there was last year when we were full remote learning. You know, her kindergarten teacher, okay, Friday, 11 a.m., it's this kind of socializing thing. So except for the kids she already knew, she knows nothing about these kids. You know, this is nothing against her teacher. She's doing a great job, but something needs to change. The administration has to support the teachers and the kids learning from home better. While we really like her teacher, I think that we would jump at the chance to have our own, you know, dedicated remote learning teachers so they could foster a sense of community and to alleviate some of the burden on the teachers who are doing all these models simultaneously. There is a little bit of science and social studies now since I last spoke up about a month ago. The first grade team has added in a little bit of that, which is great. But in listening to the call tonight, I realized that they're not getting any, what do you call that, SEL, social emotional learning. There were a couple second step videos when we were in hybrid mode before, but we haven't had any of that, and it didn't dawn on me until tonight listening to the call. So I'd really love to see some of those second step videos being added to Google Classroom or any other resources that could just be a quick link and we can implement ourselves. There's also still been no reading groups in 2 months. I know it's maybe a moot point because we're moving into hybrid now, so the teachers will hopefully have time again on Wednesdays. But my daughter met twice with her teacher early in September, and that's it. Nobody has heard her read except for myself and my husband, and we're not first grade teachers. So I would really love that additional support. And again, it's no fault of her teacher, who's doing an amazing job with the resources and time she's been allotted, but it's just not enough. So I really hope that we can come up with a better situation, because I'm assuming school will go all in again at some point during the year. I'm not a first grade teacher. We're all doing the best that we can. Also, the diversity theme, I just wanted to say, I think that's wonderful. I do hope that it will be more than just a theme for this school year, something that will hopefully become embedded in the district and the curriculums going forward past the 2020-21 school year. And perhaps some of those resources could be sent home to students to supplement, you know, what we already try to do for our kids. But again, links to videos or books and things, would be nice to see some of that sent home. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. I see, so I see Sergi family, and then I see Dimitris in the participant room. So we'll start with Sergi family.
Hi, my name's Robin Abramowitz. I live at, I don't know if we're supposed to say our address, 4 Morehouse Road. I was really disappointed to get the email today regarding the change to hybrid. For those that don't know, I'm a practicing pediatrician in the community. And while we are all disappointed to see the rates among our state and obviously the entire country rising, we have not been seeing a lot of in-school spread. We have lots of patients from the surrounding towns where I practice that are being quarantined, and there's been exposures. But fortunately, we're not seeing all of those kids that are put into quarantine ultimately test positive. Well, I was disappointed when we got the email last weekend that there was one case that we think to be in school spread, which is disappointing, but quite frankly, not totally surprising. These are mitigation strategies we have in place, and I think they're really good, but I don't think they're going to be able to prevent every single case. So the question was, what is the barometer that we're using to make such a big leap? We're saying that we're going to go into hybrid until after Thanksgiving, which sounds great, but unfortunately, the numbers statewide and nationwide are likely only going to be worse after Thanksgiving, and we're not going to be able to look in the school at that point from a full perspective and get a gauge of how things are going within our buildings. Our youngest learners, I have 3 kids. I have a middle schooler and I have 2 elementary students. The youngest ones, the amount my kindergartner has learned since October 5th is a testament to what everyone is doing in those schools. It's amazing. I'm not a teacher. I'm a terrible teacher. That's why the teachers are the professionals and they do what they do. And I feel like I don't know that this decision was made with the best scientific backing that I can see from what I'm hearing around the medical community and from the numbers that I'm talking to people in New Haven and around the state. And I was just disappointed that that's such a quick change that we're making for our children. And, I think it will be a very hard change to go forward back into all in when unfortunately we come out of the holidays and numbers are going to look worse and it's going to be more anxiety provoking to make that kind of change.
Thank you. Demetrius?
Hi, my name is Vitalina Papanikolaou. I'm speaking under my husband's phone number right now.
Can you say your street? Sorry.
Yes, we're on Harvest Moon Road.
Thank you.
I guess I have a question. Needless to say, I'm also disappointed by the email we received today that we're going to a hybrid model of learning. It's been very hard. I have 3 small children. All of them are, my oldest is in 2nd grade, and then I have 2 preschoolers. Needless to say, it's very hard to manage for all 3 of them to be learning from home. My question is, now that we're going to hybrid learning, the week of Thanksgiving, we're in the 2nd cohort, which means that we're losing our in-person instruction for Thursday and Friday because there's no school those days. And then I'm thinking ahead now, if we continue with the hybrid model in December, there's going to be another week that our cohort will lose 2 more days of instruction learning while the first cohort will have all of those days in person. I'm speaking for the week of Christmas break. So basically my question is there a way to maybe figure out a way to even out, the in-person instruction for our cohort, just like we did at the beginning of the school year when the first half of the alphabet was able to go in on a Wednesday to make up for that lost Monday.
Thank you. And David?
Hi, this is Kendra Falkenstein from North Street. I just had a question specifically on a slide that Principal Kaplan read. You said that you were measuring engagement of the students by their attendance, and you were measuring, their social and emotional by how many extra meetings were scheduled. I could tell you my kid has been attendance-wise there every day, but as far as engagement, I can't say the same. So I'm wondering how you're using those as metrics when, I don't think they actually really relate to one another.
Okay, thank you. And, there we go. Yes, Amy?
Hi, Amy Zima, Silver Hill Road. I just had a question about communication and when a case is identified in one of the ER9 schools, if all of the ER9 community can be notified of that. I think to date, when a case has been identified, say at Staples, only the families involved at Staples are notified. I think it has implications for sports, extracurricular activities, childcare arrangements, so forth, that the entire community at ER9 knows when there is a case in one of our schools. And I think a lot of communication ends up happening via the rumor mill versus direct communication, because that's only happening to one school at a time when those cases occur. So thank you for all your work, everybody.
Thank you, Amy. Any additional public comment? Okay, hearing none. I'll go to board member comment. Any comments from the board? Randy.
Yeah,
Yes, Randy.
I'm gonna, I guess, maybe follow up on Dr. Robin Abramowitz's comment, which is, and maybe direct this toward Dr. Harrison, when we're talking with the health professionals that serve Easton, is it a numbers-based approach? I mean, how are they making the determination when we move from sort of hybrid, all-in, full distance? Is it numbers, or is it based on something else?
So the conversation that we had with Mark Connor, who's the Easton health director, and with Dr. Leibowitz, who is the Reading health director, we did talk about our overall numbers within the school, and then numbers in the community. Because they serve in those health director roles, they have specifics around who the cases are. And so we're able to talk specifically about some of the patterns that we're seeing as well, which I think also help to inform their recommendations.
Okay.
Any additional comments? Jenny?
And say, I'll go. Dr. Rydell, thank you for giving us more information at the beginning of the meeting. I definitely wish it had come in advance of the notification of the transition to hybrid instead of following. And I haven't heard anything tonight that's convinced me that we need to go hybrid the next week and a half. That it's just doesn't seem that we have our cohorts that have been, the groups that have been quarantining are just coming back. So there's been separation and distance, and we're talking about how many days before the Thanksgiving holiday and the other comments that have been expressed tonight. I wish there was even a period of reconsidering now. And as much, I don't feel like I have much influence as an individual board member, but I would even ask you to reconsider and come back to, and possibly come back to the community with a different conclusion.
Any additional comment? Devin?
Yeah, I would just also ask, what is, when would it be safe then to come back to all in? If we've made the decision to go hybrid, what are we looking for? We may not have the answer tonight, but what would be an indicator or a set of indicators that would allow us to then move our students all in? And are there things that we can then encourage the community to do while we're in this hybrid model to increase the chances of returning to an all-in model?
Any other comments?
I would just second that Devin's comment, that I think if we had numbers to look at and kind of a roadmap that we know that the district will follow, if things are X, then it will be under this program. If things are Y, then we'll be under that program. It takes the guesswork out and also takes away the surprise factor.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that, so those metrics that we're talking about, that's in our stay open reopening plan. And based on those metrics, we would have been in hybrid weeks ago. And so the honest truth is, I think that what people are looking for is this target number. We've passed that target number because of what the specific data look like at the school level. And so when I talked about us being in the orange, orange is that when your cases go up to between 10 and 25 positive cases over a 14-day rolling average per 100,000 people population, that's when, based on the state guidelines in our reopening plan, that's when the recommendation to switch to a hybrid model comes in. we surpassed that a long time ago. And the reason why we felt comfortable staying in a face-to-face situation was based on the ongoing conversations with our health directors and based on the specifics of what the spread patterns look like across the schools. So, you know, I mean, I think that if we just have a number like, boom, the day that we get to this, then this is what we do. Our conversation now would be more about going remote. And I think that the sentiment that I'm hearing from community members, from board members as well, is we want to maintain in-person learning as long as feasibly and safely possible, which is exactly what we're doing. And you know, when I'm sharing, you can. So I've linked in communications what our the state data looks like as far as being able to drill down and look at our town data, and you know, this decision is based on all of that public data in concert with the specific data that we have around cases. So, you know, I know it's a huge decision and it has a huge impact. But I wanted to be really clear that it's not just made based on when we hit a target, then this is what we do next. Because the initial conversations related to this as far as the reopening guidelines was about when the county reaches numbers. And so Fairfield County is bright red and has been red for several weeks now. And so again, I think that if we were just going based on those initial guidelines that we had from the state, that would have shifted us into a much more restrictive model again a long time ago. And so in the same way that it's not appropriate to use that data to say the day that we get to this point, this is how we shift, it's also going to be important for us to really look at all of the contextual factors when planning for going back to full LAN, or if there is a situation where we would have to shift to a remote, then coming out of that remote. And so, you know, I'll be happy to share the data more publicly. It is the data that I've linked in previous communications.
I think, and I don't know, maybe we're beyond being productive tonight, but part of it is, in my view, is that the health department or whatever is sort of the Wizard of Oz, and we don't have a clear picture of, other than what was in obviously the opening plan. To your point, we've gone beyond that, and now it's kind of, I don't know, the numbers in the community versus the numbers in the school. Is there a distinction there, or are they essentially treated the same, or you know, regardless of the numbers in the school? Is it just the numbers in the town that drive these decisions, or this decision?
So Randy, that's a good point. So that's exactly why we weren't just using the numbers in the town, and we were digging deeper into the numbers in the school. So the other thing, when we look at our population in both towns of having, you know, in Easton, a population of about 7,500 people, you know, several positive cases within one family could really skew the data. So there was a period in early October when we initially shifted into orange, and so that you know, based on the initial recommendations of how that data should be interpreted, we would have made the switch to hybrid then. What we knew in talking with the health directors was that was localized to maybe one family. And so it wouldn't be appropriate to then shift an entire school district based on what's happening in one household. And so, now they don't tell me who the household is, and if it's, not related to the school, all I can do is just check in and say, here's what our data show today. Can you help me understand the change, and are there things that we need to be concerned about? What we're seeing as we have watched the number of cases in schools rise, and then that be also in line with what's happening in the town, there are some ways that you could start to consider, does that have implications as far as community spread? The other piece that's really significant in relationship to this is we're talking about specifically just what Easton or Reading data show, but if we have an adult positive case in our community that lives in a different town, that doesn't show up in our data, but that definitely informs the decisions that we're making. And so that's the other piece to kind of keep it in mind of these are all factors that that are impacting the decision. Look, I wish that there was really a very simple equation that, when we got to this number, it could just be very simple and, we click a button and then nobody has to fully understand it or explain it, or that would be a lot easier. And quite honestly, I think on behalf of superintendents, this was one of the things that we were asking for much clearer guidance from the state and from the Department of Public Health, because as many of us say, I'm a doctor, but not that kind. And so, this putting us in positions to be epidemiologists, it's really, really not what we do well. And so we have to then make those decisions in concert with the health officials who are doing this work and getting direct guidance from the Department of Public Health. I have spent more time with Department of Public Health, not just our local folks, but at the state level and emergency management services people than I would care to wish. I want to be in the business of kids learning, not this work. And so it is all of these pieces that go into the decisions. And I'm not really sure how to put that all in an email, other than really just being able to communicate that it's not as simple as when we get here, then this is what we do, and then when it changes to this is exactly the next the next decision. There's a superintendent in our area that, while their town was shifting into red, they were just going back full in person with their elementary students, the way that we did October 5th. Why that made sense to them was because of the unique cases of what was happening with the data in their specific community. So it's even hard to say, well, this is what they're doing over here, and so we should be doing exactly the same thing, because it is so incredibly localized.
Well, thanks for that. We appreciate it.
Good. Any additional comment? Okay, very good. Look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Randy. Second.
Second. Excuse me, second.
Thank you, Jeff. All in favor? Aye. 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 I heard Gretchen. Very good. Unanimously adjourned at 10:12 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.